Hey, welcome to Cashrules with the two Nicks. I'm Nick Foley, and there's Nick Gilmour, the man, the myth, the legend. How you doing, Nick?
Good. I am fabulous, brother. Yourself?
I'm doing well, brother. We're live on YouTube right now. Is that what I understand? Live on YouTube and all the channels. So if you're watching this, write in. Do yourself a favor. I got my put my scarf on. Not practical, just for fashion. You know what? It looks fashion. It's fantastic. I was trying to put the word fantastic and fashion all together, and it didn't work out. So that's all right. Hopefully the rest of the show does. So we got a lot of things to talk about. What's new this week? Give me something new, man. Give me one of your wins.
We're looking at a couple different deals on the go right now, and there's a commercial residential mix project that we have pretty close to coming to fruition. Pretty excited about it. Yeah, I mean, if it goes through, it's gonna be a huge win for us. It's right downtown Kingston, right in our wheelhouse. So we always like to do stuff in our hometowns, Belleville / Kingston.
Would you say it's a big? Would you say it's a big deal or medium deal, small deal, large deal? What is it?
It would be a medium-sized deal, I think. Probably $5 or $6 million. I mean, it's big for, it's not no money, but certainly, there's guys, and we've been involved in stuff where the money's a little bit bigger and scarier, but it's scary at any of the millions.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that, man, because I asked that question, Nick, because I know it's a loaded, subjective question. What would be a medium-sized deal for you would be an extraordinary large deal for me. And I think that goes to, where we are in our real estate investing journey and where we are in our business journey. And I guess that's the question that I'm gonna lead with. We're gonna jump right into it today. I'm gonna lead with you is what are some of the some of the things that you're seeing as far as like people get caught up in and they get scared about, not wanting to do something, right? Because they think it's too big or, they think it's too far down. The success rate is going to be too far down the road. Like, what would you say to those people who are a little bit down on their luck and like, I don't know, I don't have the capacity to put this deal together?
That was me. That was me. I've been that guy. I've been the guy who has been down on his luck big fucking time, like to the point where, it's like, why am I even fucking here? What's the point? Not only financially, but mentally and physically, like the whole everything about my legal, like my whole everything that could be bad was going bad. But what makes you strong and what makes you a winner is not how you win so much as how you lose and come back from that loss. That is the most important. And I was actually speaking with a gentleman a couple weeks ago, and he said he really enjoyed listening to the podcast and the videos, and he said he was having a rough go. He's like, I'm just trying to get back on my feet. And the one thing I said was, listen to me. I've been there. That's why we do this, because I've been there. I wasn't handed dick all. My parents were extremely hardworking people. They still are. They're nuts. I'm very, very fortunate to have both of them in my life working. But I certainly wasn't handed anything and worked very hard to get where I am. And I started with zero. So to anybody listening or anybody who's out there and you don't have, that money for the down payment or that money to catapult you into that deal, that's fine. That's fine, because you're going to hustle and you're going to grind it out and you're going to get it. And there's little bits and tricks that, can get you into the game without having to spend a whole bunch of money and really not having to spend any money.
All right. Well, let's play with that. There's two things that you just said that I think our listeners are going to want to listen to. Number one, we'll go back to that in a second about the structuring a deal and a big deal, a medium-sized deal for yourself, but also an important one nonetheless with a few $1 million involved. I think that it'd be interesting to learn and do a deep dive into the structure. And we do have we do need to recognize that you're only allowed to say so much, Nick. We get that. The deal's still, from what I understand, and because I know you quite well, we talk almost every day. The deal is still yet to be closed. So we're going to be careful with what we're going to reveal. And whenever you're like, I can't really talk about that, we'll just steer the conversation somewhere else. But I think there'll be some good insight for our listeners. First thing though, before I want to talk about that, you talked about, being able to, get into the industry, get into the real estate industry with, not a lot of money and not, not being able to do it in a way where you need that 5% down payment or a 20% down payment and things like that. So what would be an example of how you could help build someone's empire right here, right now? What would you do? What are some cues?
So like we were talking about before we went live, and I think this is, you explained it really well. And it was like, this is one thing. Okay, everyone listen, people, this is one thing out of hundreds. Okay. So we were talking before we went live about different ways you can create that cash flow. Okay. And one way is you need a place to live. You don't have any, that money for the down payment. You can't afford the 5% down. You can't afford, your 20% down, but you can afford 10 grand. Okay. So there's something, we were talking about, I can't remember the term they use, but it's.
Yeah. Albatross. Is that?
Yes. Yeah. That's what I'm coming into.
Yeah. The albatross. Yeah.
So renting a place, okay, putting your first and last down, and then renting another place, be it in the same building or wherever, for yourself. Okay. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to live in the one, but you're going to sublet the other one. And you're going to sublet it for a few $100 more, $100 more than perhaps you would get, or perhaps whatever the rent is, you're going to make a few $100 more. Yeah. Or Airbnb it. This is something that's huge. We see this in Kingston like all the time, especially with the students at Queen's University. So actually, I was involved in a deal where we had a multi-unit student rental. So it was like a mid-rise, and there was students who like lined up to rent this thing. And I think the rent for like a one bedroom was around $1,500. They were Airbnb-ing this place to whoever and actually paying the rent and making money on top of it. So talk about being entrepreneurial. That's one way. Yep. So they're in school, they have a place to live, they Airbnb it and then stay at a buddy's or whatever, pay the rent, but they also create cash flow for themselves. And that cash flow can be saved for a down payment. It can be used to start a business. It can be, used for many different things.
Yeah, no, and I really like that model. So just to summarize what you're saying, and I've came across this in my own learning, where you rent out one apartment and you say to the landlord or you say to the tenant or the supervisor, or the owner, and just like, listen, I'm going to rent out the other one as well. I'm going to use it as a short-term rental or an Airbnb, and be transparent with it. Now, some people will be like, I don't know about that. But you say things like to them like, hey, listen, it's going to be cleaned more often than it would if you had a long-term renter in there, right? I'm going to clean it after every stay. I'm going to be in the building as well, so I know what's going to happen there, in and around that business. And so what I read when I read about this person doing this is he started that way, and then he bought another, and then he rented another one, and then eventually he got to a point where there was new bills happening, and because a lot of these places, and you know this, Nick, a lot of these places are big corporations, and then they just want to get them rented out. And so they get a superintendent that wants to rent them out. And he said, I'll take, 6 out of the 30 that you have. And they're like, okay, done. Or I'll take 12 units out of the 18 you have. Right. And so they're just Airbnb-ing it, or they are short-term renting it to, contractors and things like that. And so what this guy did was just continues to have the cash flow, and it builds his own, personal wealth, But the one thing that we will say is it doesn't do anything for appreciation because you have no stake in you don't own the building, you rent the apartment. But what can you do? If you have good cash flow, then what? What are your thoughts?
Well, it also adds to your borrowing power.
Exactly.
So if you make $100,000 a year at your job, or $50,000 a year, or $20,000 a year, and then you have an extra 20 or 25 of free cash flow that's going directly towards your bottom line, then that just increases your borrowing power by 2. Yeah. So long as you don't have yourself buried in debt. And that's when then you can go and buy something.
Well, that's
and
it, right?
That's when you can grow.
Absolutely. So then you buy a rental for, $400,000, 20% down, or something like that. And you're in and around that, threshold, which is going to cost you around 80,000. So you do this with time, and then you've set yourself up to do that. And then, you can continue then you have something that's going to appreciate. You're not so worried about what they're bringing in for rent, hopefully you're covering your cost. But what you're also doing is, setting yourself up for more rentals and just managing a business. And it's another thing too, on the outside of this. And it's kind of like, one of those things, it's a small way to manage a portfolio, right? Like you have a big, huge portfolio. I have a small portfolio, but a lot of people don't know how to manage it. Right. And so this will help with that kind of stuff. Talk a little bit about the importance of being able to manage a portfolio.
Well, it's everything. It's a make or break in that business, in the real estate business. So you have rents coming in, and I can tell you from experience, if those rents aren't paid, there's not a whole lot you can do. Okay. So that's why you need good tenants who are good people, and they are going to pay their rent. And if there's an issue, they discuss it with you and you come to, a common ground that helps everyone. But the banks do not give a fuck about you. If you don't pay, and I better be careful here because I've been lambasted before, but if you don't pay, then they'll just take your asset. They don't want it, but you need to pay the bank, okay? So you're on the hook. So if you can't manage this money coming in and going out, then, you're dead before you start. And I think it's the same in business. Like, look at one of our stores, just one store, for example. So there's so many things coming in and there's so many things going out. I remember, here's a really good story. So there's huge transactions happening between in one of those stores. So we have, tons of customers coming in. Thank God. We're very fortunate that we have loyal customers. They come in, spend money, whatever. So we get all this money that comes in. And I remember the first year in business, I looked at the bank account, and it's like after we've been in business for 6 months, and we had built up 150 or 200 grand. And I was like, holy fuck, this is easy. Then we hit fucking November. Okay. And it was like, because you're paying all these bills. Everything's catching up to you because you're on terms. So you have 30 days terms. Your busy season's over. You're coming into slow season. So the displacement or the difference between break even, okay, so your costs that are fixed, okay, and what you're making, those two numbers come closer, okay? So there's smaller and smaller amounts being made every year, and when those come right together, there's nothing being made, right? So if you can't manage money in those situations, imagine if I took the 150 and I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'll go buy a fucking Lamborghini. A used Lamborghini for 150, mind you, because or spent it. Then when you get to those times, you're fucked. I remember my dad saying, just watch, because he had experience. And I was like, whatever. I know the business because I did know the business. I grew up in the fucking business.
Yeah.
And he was right. I did listen to him and he was right. Okay. And it was very important lesson for me to learn. And I've never forgot that conversation that him and I had. And then when it actually, the bank account went down significantly. And I'm like, oh, wow, we only made like $5,000 this year. When you look, year to date or our fiscal year end, we made like $5,000 after we got paid and that, and we weren't getting paid a lot, mind you, but it's really interesting to see how close the numbers are when you're starting a business. So circling back to the answer to that question, if you can't manage money, do not go into business, do not go into real estate, and sign your paycheck over to somebody who can.
So speaking of that, then, like what would be some of the tips? Like someone wants to get into business and, they have to manage money and they have to manage that kind of stuff. What would you suggest then if they weren't great at it?
Know your expenses. Okay. That's number one. You need to know your expenses. If you don't know your expenses, that's huge. That's a massive hurdle. Okay. So you need to know what your expenses are and know what money is going out. Your fixed costs. So there's fixed costs and then there's your variable costs or unfixed expenses. These things are obviously, if they're not fixed, they change. And if they're fixed, they stay the same. Things that stay the same: rent, garbage pickup, like for us, dumpsters, phone bill, our laundry, like for the aprons and stuff. Those things don't change. Okay. So figure out those costs and then okay, so I can't change that. I know what that is. Then what's my variable costs? Wages. Okay. How much you take for yourself, how much product you buy, how much you're putting back into the business to buy, like, keep it nice and cosmetically appealing and investing back in the business. These things are things that you can change. Okay. Then know how much margin you make. So you need to know your overall margin. So if you sell a product like we do, and you only make 30%, so it costs you X, so the difference is your profit, but you make different margins on different products, you need to know what that average operating margin is based on what you sell. So know your margin, know your fixed costs, know your expenses, and then find out how much business you need to do to break even. Okay? And then once you know that, then that's when you start to think, okay, new ideas. What do I need to do? How do I grow the business? How do I make more here? How do I, sell? Maybe if I decrease my margin, I'll sell more volume, ultimately making more profit. So then you can start to tweak the formula in order to really dial in on understanding the business. So that would be my biggest tip. Again, going back to expenses.
So what would you do to combat tight margins? Like, is there a trick that entrepreneurs, small business owners can do? Like, is it looking for the best supplier? What are some of the things that you can do for that? Relationships
are the number one with anything. Customers, suppliers, whatever. You need to have a good relationship. If you're in business, you've got to understand the business, which typically means knowing people in the business, which in turn will, allow you to create and, grow these relationships. Now, that being said, they're not going to say, oh, just because we're friends, I'll sell you strip loin steaks for X when they're actually Y. But maybe they'll say to you, if you buy 40 cases, then I can give them to you for 20 cents a pound cheaper. Or maybe they can say, look, I've got a product that has 45 days age on it. It needs to go in the next 10 days. Can you move X amount of cases? I'll give you this much of a discount. So these are the things that the relationship allows you to get in on. The types of deals, and that is probably, again, that would be the most important thing that you really need to you really need to understand again in business is these relationships and be on top of it. Here is a fucking huge thing I see all the time. Okay? And this really pisses me off because people think I'm going to start a business. Okay? I'm going to start a business and I'm going to work there for fucking 5 days a week, take my 2 days off. And here, you want to know what's a huge one that people do? Restaurants and bars. The restaurant and bar business is the most labor intensive business of all time. It is horrible. I know I have tons of colleagues and friends who own restaurants and own bars, and I work crazy hours. They work like 8 till noon in the morning, and then they're back in there at 5 till 3 in the morning. Like, it's insane. But you get these fucking Joe asshole who gets an inheritance and thinks he's going to open up a restaurant, sit at the bar like fucking Cheers, and talk to everybody and just bankroll cash. And then when he gets tired of that, well, it doesn't matter. The employees will run it. But he hasn't fucking given them any fucking ammunition to run the business. He's just there. You know what happens to those businesses, Nick?
What's that?
They go to zero with a bullet.
What does that mean? Explain to us. I like that.
They tank. They go under. They're done. Because as a business owner, you never step away. You never step away. I don't care who you are or what you do or what your business is. You never step away from that business. It never runs itself. So if you are somebody who's, has had a business for many, many, many years, and maybe you're getting into your 60s and a lot of your stuff's paid off and your focus really isn't growth. It's just kind of to maintain, or maybe it's you want the next generation to take over. Then maybe you can start to step back, relax, pass it on to the next generation and take a breath. But you never just step away and it runs itself and it's all good. Because the second that you lose touch with pricing, costs, margins, if your employees don't think you care, then why the fuck would they care? Yeah. If I didn't care, why should they care? But the thing about me is, I do care. I care more than anything about these businesses. I will die, and it seems like I'm being dramatic here, but I'm not. This is a fact of Nick Gilmour. I will die before I let those businesses die. Period.
Yeah, that's some powerful stuff. I heard a similar analogy with Will Smith, right? And he said he's got a great mindset, and he said the same type of thing. And it's a great, wonderful analogy where he's like, as soon as I have it in my mind, it's done. It's done. You just don't know about it. And he said, the difference between you and I is, he's like, you may be a better business person, you may be a better actor, you may be a better athlete, maybe a better everything. But if you get on the treadmill and I get on the treadmill, you're getting off first, or I'll commit to death.
Yeah.
It was that simple, right? And it was interesting because I've adopted that mindset. I know you have it. When I did that cross-country cycle in 2015, my sister asked me one day, she's like, well, what if you don't do it? And I was like, well, I'm going to do it. She's like, what if you don't? Like, what if you can't? I was like, well, I'll commit to death. Like, I will die before I don't cycle my bike across the country. But it's funny though, when you say that, it just kind of burns all the boats, right? Like they used to always say, you want to take the island, burn the boats. Well, you don't have another plan. And I think that's why you're such an astute business person, is because you do things differently than most. And I think a great analogy would be we're a fan of, he just passed away, but DMX. And, he has an interesting way he had an interesting way. He's since passed away. There he is with the Angels, grew those wings himself. Here's the thing. When he was young, he was Well, I'll let you talk about it, Nick, because I know you're I know you're a fan of us. Talk a little bit about DMX and how he's influenced both you and I.
So DMX, obviously, he's a rapper. He was in the late 90s. And for those of you who don't know, I actually have DMX lyrics tattooed here and here, which may surprise some of you, but he's very deep. And the connection I want to make here, and I think that this is where you were going, was DMX came out in the late 90s, and people, so you had other rappers, you had Jay-Z, you had guys like Mace, Puff Daddy, different guys who were saying the same thing. So they were talking about money, they were talking about girls, cars, gold. They were all talking about the same bullshit. Okay? Superficial things. DMX came out and he's very vulgar. Okay? And he's very to the point. But what DMX talked about was the struggle, the mental health issues. Maybe it doesn't, if you don't really listen to the music, you won't understand what I'm saying. But he was very deep about his struggle growing up, the rough, tough neighborhoods, and surviving yourself. On my arm, the tattoo says, to live is to suffer, but to survive is to find meaning in the suffering. Okay? To live is to suffer, but to survive is to find meaning in the suffering. Okay? The second I heard that, I was like, this guy speaks my language. So, late 90s, cars, monies, jewels, fornicating with women. This was the thing that they were talking about. And I see you laughing. It's classic.
That's the word.
And he was different, man. He was different because he talked about these things that were so deep. And you know what else was different? He went platinum on his first 5 albums. Nobody else has done that or did that. Back to back to back to back to back platinum albums. Boom. Because he was different. And in business, if you follow what everybody else is doing, and in life too, okay? So this is a blanket statement. Anyone listening, if you're in business or you're not, if you follow the pack, or if you look at somebody and they're different, or they don't fit the mold of what you think people should look like or do or act or speak, if they're different, well, that doesn't matter. That doesn't mean that they can't be successful or they can't do things or they can't win, because you're just doing what everybody else is doing and they're not even fucking winning. So follow the pack and it's not going to lead you to success. I promise you that. I promise you that, guys. Now there's, you got to understand the markets and you got to understand where people are going and what they want and all that stuff. But I'm talking at a real high level. You got to get all this bullshit out of your head and you've got to really just peel back the layers and understand yourself. And if what's in you is different than everybody else, embrace it. Embrace it and go and fucking win. Win for me, win for Foley, win for yourself.
Yeah. Most importantly, win for yourself, right? I mean, I think that's the mentality we try to, to articulate here. Be who you are and allow that to come out in how you live. And you do that, right? And I do that is, just try to live differently from the pack. And like you said, do the research, understand the numbers, understand, what's happening in our world. But, it's important. Like those people that are telling you that, oh, you shouldn't do it this way. They're not winning. There's half the time, anybody that has ever been successful in this world will never tell you to do it the same way as everybody else.
Yep.
Right? They just won't. Because if they're successful, they've done it differently. What's on the other arm? I'm curious.
So this one says to live is to suffer, but to survive is to find meaning in the suffering. And this one says, what good is it for a man to gain the world and lose his soul? So what that means to me is what good is it to go out and have everything in this world and experience everything and have money, but do it at the expense of someone else? So, like Gary Vee says, be the tallest building in the city by being the tallest building in the city, not by burning down all the other buildings. Right? So you want to be successful, but do it on your terms and do it in a way that's not detrimental to other people.
Well, and then even one step further, and I know you've done a lot to this, and I try to speak to it as best I can, is do it while helping others as well, right? Because there's enough to go around. And I think that's a big misnomer, is that people just like, wow, I got to, save it for myself. I was asking a buddy the other day about, he said, what school? He's talking about a school that he got asked to speak to. And I said, oh, cool, what school? And he's like, I can't remember. And in my head, I'm just like, no, you remember, but you're afraid for some reason, you're afraid that I'm going to go and I would never do that. But like, people holding everything to themselves is just kind of a misnomer of like, well, I don't want to tell Nick how to succeed in business, because if he succeeds, he's going to take a bigger piece of the pie. What's your experience in that? What's your mindset or your thoughts on that?
So anyone who is truly successful, and any guy in business who has realized success, always helps, because they know. Say that again. Every guy who's in business, every guy who has ever succeeded in business will always help you succeed. And the reason for that is because they know how difficult it is to succeed. Okay? Because they've been there. So people who don't help you are people who, number one, they don't want you to succeed for some reason, but you shouldn't be talking to those people anyways. And number two, very small-minded people who aren't successful and maybe led on like they are, and they think that you're going to steal their idea or whatever. I don't fucking know. But I do know this, that anybody who has succeeded in business and I've asked advice for, they're like, how can we help you? What do you need to know? How long do you have to talk? Like, they want to help you. So, if you're always going to get those people who are cutting you down, and you're always going to get those people who are saying things like, oh, well, he's only successful because of his parents, or he's only successful because he caught a lucky break, or he's only successful because who the fuck knows. But luckily for you guys, opinions don't really fucking matter. You know what does matter? Facts and reality. So make your reality the success.
I like that. Yeah, opinions don't pay your bills. Their opinions don't pay your bills, right? I mean, it really is that simple. I've been around people that I've been, kind of, put in that box, you know what I mean? Where it's just like, oh, well, he's going to be, he's this type of business person, or he's this type of presenter, right? And if you're trying to break out of that box, it's harder if you're around people that are continuing to, put you in it and not make you feel as though you have the value that you deserve, right? But like you said, luckily for us, other people's opinions don't have to pay your bills. So
yeah, here's I want to tell this story. It's funny. It's actually hilarious and hopefully motivating to those listening. I owned meat shops, still do, thank God. And I was in business for a few years, and then I wanted to do the real estate thing, blah, blah, blah. Tune into the earlier podcast to figure out that little tidbit of my life.
Yeah.
But I was developing a property, and I needed to raise capital. And this was like early on. So I put a sign up, and it said Gilmour Properties Development, and it had a picture, and then it said call for details. And I remember somebody came in the store and they're like, what are you, real estate mogul now? And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, oh, I saw your sign. And I was like, yeah, doing a development up the road and whatever. And they're like, yeah, maybe you should just stick to cutting meat. So I remember how fucking mad that made me. But I eventually turned it into fuel and motivation. I was far less disciplined then. And I didn't know how to channel these things like I do today, which is very important. And it hurt. It hurt my feelings. But ultimately, I did the development and did very well on it. And that person can go fuck themselves.
Well, there you go, man. You heard it here. And I think you're right, though. I think it's one of those things where that caught me off guard, Nick. And normally what you say doesn't. Because I know you really well. But you're right. I mean, I think it comes down to, people are going to have. I always subscribe to the notion that if you have enough naysayers in your life, it just means you're doing stuff worth talking about. Because one of the things that I learned in my life is if people there's a strong possibility if you're doing something that's out of the ordinary, people are going to talk about you. But I know 100% for certain, I'm not talking about them.
Yeah.
Right. I'm only here to cheerlead, man. I'm only here to help and empower the best way I can. I know you are too.
Yeah.
But I said what I'm not doing is chirping another person behind their back about, business deals and things that they're doing that is successful for them. It's just not my ethos, or it's just not my makeup, and I think you're 100% right. This guy comes in and I bet you he gave you fuel. I mean, not that you needed it, but I bet you he gave you a little bit of fire in the belly being like, yeah, watch this then. Cut, stick to cut and meet my, what.
I mean, it sucks. There's people and ultimately we're not speaking to those types of people on this podcast because they will never know. They will never know. But if I see somebody doing something, no matter how small it may seem, I want to see them win. I want to see them do good. Like, I actually want this. I know. And trust me, when I was a teenager, okay, I had a chip on my shoulder. I still have a chip on my shoulder, okay? But I had a chip on my shoulder where it was like, why does he have this? Why does he have that? Why don't I have this? Poor me. I'm a fucking pansy. Okay? And I'm still that way. But instead, I say this. Nick Foley has a BMW. Hey, Nick, how did you make the money to buy that? Do you mind sharing that with me so that I can buy one too? That's just a slight change in what I do. There's a slight change because there's things in your mind that are pre-programmed that are very, very hard to change. But if you can make these slight little variations to the way you act and the way you respond to things and how you feel, change the trigger that makes you angry to the trigger that might make you curious. If you can do that, that is when the success will come. And I mean, I could remember being so angry at different things, and I would see them because we all grow up, and there's different people. There's rich families, and there's people who get to play sports and all that other jazz. And now, so I know what it's like to be on the other side of the fence, is what I'm saying, and be that guy who hates. But then when I came over, it's so liberating to want to see people win. And further to that, not give a fuck what people think about you. It makes you feel so free. Because then it's just you and yourself. And I'm not saying you don't have your family and all this, but I'm talking at a deeper level. It's just you. You're doing it for you. And then in turn, you're doing it for you so that you can help everyone around you, like your family and your parents and kids, etc.
Yeah, no, that's very well said. I mean, I think for myself, and I know that you are too. About 2 years ago, I decided that I was going to change my mentality to, like, people ask me all the time, well, what do you do for a living? Because we have unconventional jobs, things like that. But I'm a learner. Like, I understand what's on my paycheck. I understand that I'm an entrepreneur and invest in real estate, speaker, things like that. And you're a real estate developer, investor, and business person. But at the end of the day, what it comes down to is what you just said. And if you broke that down into its simplest form in one word, is that you're a learner. And in order to learn what other people are doing, in order to learn, you have to have that like you said, you have to ask questions. Hey, Nick, how did you get that? I don't want to be above you, by the way, but how did you get that? So that I can learn how to do that. And I think that if more people just asked, and it was just, humble inquiry. We've talked about it in previous shows, but if more people would just ask questions, it's amazing. I heard a great statement the other day, is I ask all kinds of questions because everybody in this world knows something I don't. Let that sink in. Everybody in this world knows something I don't. And every single one of our listeners knows something we don't, Nick, but we know something they don't either. Right. And in order for us to get the best out of people in that capacity, we need to ask those educated questions. And an educated question is simply just asking how or why. You talked about the deal at the beginning of the show. As we're coming in, it's already been 40 minutes, almost 45 minutes. What structuring the deal? It was a big deal, and I think that or medium size. That's what you said. But you're dealing with millions of dollars, and I think that it'd be interesting, Nick, for our listeners to understand what the mindset and the process that goes into high level deal making like that. And this isn't an indictment on any of our listeners that may not have been at that point yet, because if you just listen to what Nick just said 30 seconds ago, you're going to be like, well, we want you to succeed. So maybe there's a time, and here's our way of showing you this is how to do it. So maybe talk about the structuring of the deal, the mindset, the mentality, and everything goes in right from the seeing the building to where the deal is. And we'll go from there.
Okay, so I can take this. I'm going to take an example because it's the same formula for this type of a development, no matter when you do it. And we've done a few of these. And when I say a few, I mean more than a few. So you see a project that you want to do, okay? And in this instance, it's something where it needs to be fixed up, okay? So you need to purchase it. And let's take the one that we got done. That one was $2.7 million. Okay. $2.7 million just to buy it. Then it needed to be renovated and cleaned up and redone in the front. Parking lot had to be cleaned up, etc. Okay, so we had to add units. We had to change some rents. We had to do our work. So without getting into the boring details of how we increased the value, we needed to raise the capital. So I had to go to investors and get the money. So we reached out to different people who we know invest in these projects, and we said, would you like to invest? Here's what we would offer you in return. If you invest, I think the minimum was $200,000, you'll get, I think on this particular one, it was like 10 or 11% per annum. And it was a 2-year commitment. So basically what we had done was we went out, asked, we raised the capital. But on top of that 2.7, we had to raise more money. Okay? Because we then had to do the things that were going to increase the value. So I think we had to raise another $700,000. All right? And the total was 3.4. So we had to raise 3.4, and then we had to put our work in, blah, blah, blah. and then the turnaround value at the end of it was 4.5. So 4.5 million. So 4.5 million at the end of the day. And we had done it on investor capital. But the deal, so we had to pay the investors out and everything. And then, the difference in what we paid out versus the new value. Obviously, we went to the bank, negotiated the deal with the bank, and then they paid out the monies owing. And it was just, again, going back to relationships, because I knew who to go to. And let me just, I didn't grow up in this. I didn't go to school for this. I've taken courses, and I've taken my mortgage and real estate and all that stuff, those courses. But that doesn't teach you how to invest or teach you how to talk to people or network. I learned those skills on my own. I shouldn't say on my own. I learned them from talking to people and learning how to communicate and how they did it, and then mirroring what they did. And then I would take that idea, take their business plan, take their formula, and transpose it on what I was doing. Starts off on a smaller level, but it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. So you can use this, what I just said. Let's do another quick example. If let's say you want to renovate a house and it's $300,000 to buy it and you have $0 in the bank, but it's going to be $50,000 to renovate it. Okay. So you need 300 plus 50. And then another, say, I don't know, 50,000. So say you need 400,000. Okay. So you need to borrow 400,000. And it's going to take you probably about a year before you can remortgage it through the bank and all that jazz, or sell it. So you raise the capital and you say, okay, listen, Uncle Joe, I need 400,000 because Uncle Joe's got some bankroll. And he says, okay, I want 10% interest for the year, which means you need to pay Uncle Joe 40,000. But you understand and because you know the market, because you're studying it, because you're obsessed with it, that this house is going to sell for 500,000 at least, because you're being conservative, because you don't want to shave your balls off. So you buy the house for 3. You take the 100,000, you fix it up, do all your jazz. That extra 100,000 is going to cover your real estate fees or whatever soft costs you might have to sell it. Okay? Boom. Get it all done. You sell it for 500,000. Uncle Joe, here's your extra 40. There's 60,000 left between 440 and 500. 60,000. Thank you very much. That's your first big deal. Congratulations. You just made 60,000 in 1 year. On top of the 60,000 you make working for fucking Joe Construction. Now, you had to put some extra hours in, but so does everybody who fucking succeeds. You weren't going out to fucking beers with the boys, and you weren't going out hanging out with fucking Donna from Tinder. You were going out, busting your balls, and creating something that was going to give you value.
That's wonderful insight. And I think that, so I got a couple questions because I know some of our listeners are probably thinking that. So take Uncle Joe out of the equation, because that's a family and you're kind of walking back and forth. But back and forth, how do you come up with the terms as far as like interest per annum and how it's paid out and things? I'd be interested to see, because I know that it's hard for me, Nick, because I do know the details of this deal a little bit, because you and I went back and forth on it. But I want others to kind of get the insight on. So you got this investor that gave the money for it, invested in it. How did you come up with the terms, and then how did you come up with the payout?
Well, you got to understand what the finish line is. So you got to look at the project at the very end. Okay. And then you work backwards. So what's it going to be worth at the end? In this deal that I just talked about, it was 500,000. You knew that once you did what you were going to do, it was going to be worth 500,000. Then you could work backwards. And from that working backwards, you can create the terms. Okay. You could create the terms that were going to lay the foundation of the interest rates and all the details of the deal. So much like the bigger deals, it's all the same. A wise man once told me, and he's very wise, and he was a mentor of mine. He said, I don't care if you're dealing with 100,000, with 500,000, with 100 million. And this guy was very wealthy. It's just numbers. He's like, and at the time when we had this conversation, he's like, okay, so you're going to do a project and you buy this house for 100 grand. Can you pay the 100 grand back? Are you able to pay the 100 grand back? I'm like, no. So he's like, if you borrow 100 million, you can't pay that back either. So what's the fucking difference? And again, back to the managing money thing. You're not going to lose because you're not going to mismanage the money, and you're understanding where you're going to go, and you have contingencies built in. And another little nugget of information that a lot of people may not know is there's something called a vendor take back. And to walk you through a vendor take back, and I've done these many times, and what you do is you will take the house, let's say, is 300,000. Okay, and the bank says we'll give you 80% loan to value. Okay, so you need to come up with 20% of 300,000, 60 grand. Okay, and you're like, fuck, I don't have 60 grand. I don't even have $60. Well, you go to this vendor, the seller, the person who owns the property, and you say, look, I want to renovate it. Okay, I want to buy this thing and I want to renovate it, and then I'm going to sell it. Would you be willing to do a vendor take back for $60,000, and I will pay you 6% interest or whatever, 10% interest on that 60 grand, and I will pay you at the end of the term, 1 year when it's all said and done? The vendor says, okay, sure. I'll make 6 grand on top of my 60. Plus I'm getting paid out from the house from the bank when they come in with their 80. So he leaves his 60 in. You've got your down payment from his equity because of EDB is coming in as equity. And then you're in. And then when you sell it, you just pay him out. So that's another kind of shift or a turn if you can't raise the money or if you don't know anybody with money. And if you don't know somebody with money or you don't know people with money, then go find them. Go find them. Go out and talk to people. And you will find them. And show them that you're a good person. And have a good plan. Right? Like, have a good fucking plan where you're bringing in an actual presentation about how this is going to go down. Because if you go in with a napkin and a couple of fucking numbers written on it, people will tell you to get the fuck out. But good plan, understand the ins and outs of what you can do, and fucking execute as planned.
Yeah. Great stuff. No, that's some good insight, man. And that's the thing, right? Like, all the terms are different. Sometimes it's 6%, 7.5%. You pay that out. Construction, sometimes it's after 1 year. Sometimes it could be after, it's the interest every year, but then the principal back when you sell it after 2 years. Like, I mean, that's the thing. It's just, it's different. Or sometimes it's just, it's the interest after 2 years plus the 40 grand and then interest on top of that, right? Another
offered 30. We've offered 30K or 30% back on deals.
Yeah.
25, 20, 15. We've offered, it depends. It depends how much capital you're raising, what the deal is, how much you're making. Don't be greedy. Because if you're making a lot of money, your investors should be making a lot of money.
Yeah.
You're taking the risk, but it's also their money, and so are they. And they're investing in you. So you need to look after your investors and make sure you make them a lot of money. So if you're making a lot, make damn sure they're making a lot.
Yeah.
And further to that, they always get paid before you. So if you don't have any extra, baby, it don't matter.
Yeah.
Because they get paid. no matter what. If I got to go and apply at McDonald's to make the extra, to pay the investors, then that's what happens because the burden falls on my shoulders. I'm the operator. And I think that's why people invest with people like me, because that's my mentality. And it won't fail because I won't let it fail. But they certainly won't lose money at all.
Love it. All right, it's rant time. It's that time of the show where we have a rant time. So our folks, friends that are part of the listeners here, that are part of the Cashrules podcast, what I like to do to end the show is ask Nick a question that he doesn't know what I'm going to ask, and then I let him rant on it. And we haven't talked about it today. We knew we were going to do rant time. He doesn't know when it's going to happen, but he certainly doesn't know the question that I'm going to ask, and I just let him go at it. And he does it for, sometimes it's 20 minutes, sometimes, no, I'm just kidding, but sometimes it's a few minutes, sometimes it's short and sweet. So here's the question for rant time. My exciting time of the show. I really like this time just because I think there's some good nuggets there and some good sound bites. Although I will say, not too often in these podcasts, Nick, we've been partners now for, I think, almost 10 episodes. You catch me in a laugh, and you've caught me 3 or 4 times with some of the stuff that's come out of your mouth that I'm looking forward to listening to the tape as we do every day or every week. And I know I'm going to giggle again, and I'm sure our listeners were. So you ready for rant time?
Let's do it.
All right. So rant time. Here's the question for you. Why does what you say and what you do matter? Why does what you say and what you do matter? Go.
Well, fuck. Like, it goes back to exactly what we were just talking about. So take this, for example. You got fucking Buddy posting on Instagram about God knows what, okay? A bunch of bullshit that girls or inappropriate posts or who knows what he's putting up. And then he applies for a job. Well, you think that people aren't going to look at that, right? You think that your potential employer isn't going to look at that? That you got a picture of some broad's ass on your Instagram or Facebook, or you're talking about, how you hate work. And I think this is a huge issue, even in our society, because you have people who it's so easy to just say what's on your mind because you get on there and type stuff and he's a fucking idiot and he doesn't know this and he doesn't know that. But all these people who are saying all this stuff have zero credibility to speak on anything. Okay? So if you're going to be an operator, if you want to be a jerk off, okay, if that's your lifelong goal, if you want to be a jerk off, then do whatever you want. Talk, speak however you want, treat people like shit, run around and think you're the winner. Okay? But if you want to succeed in life, understand that you represent yourself, your family, your brand, your business, your employer's business, and represent all of those things accordingly, like a good human being. I'm not like, I swear because that's me. But I also speak a lot of truth. And I also speak a lot about how it's important to be a good person. So swearing doesn't make you a good person or a bad person. But how you treat people does. And how you treat people ultimately is the most important thing over anything. And further to that, my mentor told me this, and it stuck with me. And he said 2 things to me. Number 1, he said, in business, you know who does not succeed, Nick? You know who does not succeed in business? The guy who knows everything. That's what he said to me. The guy who knows everything. And I texted Ash last night, and I was like, you got to make a graphic for this because it's fucking epic. And she's like, what is it? And I said, the guy in the room who knows everything knows nothing.
I'm Nick Foley. He's Nick Gilmour. This Cashrules.